The baby was crying, the forest was burning, and the young mother knew she had only seconds left. Smoke swallowed the trail behind her as flames climbed the trees on both sides, turning the quiet wilderness into a wall of fire. She pressed her newborn against her chest and tried to run, but pain shot through her injured ankle, sending her crashing to the ground. The baby slipped from her trembling arms, and she quickly pulled him close again, shielding his tiny face from the smoke. "Please," she whispered through tears, looking toward the burning trail. "Someone, please help us." But there was no one in sight. Only fire, smoke, and the terrible sound of trees cracking in the heat. If stories like this touch your heart, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change an entire life. Her name was Clara, and she had never imagined that motherhood would begin with terror. She had been traveling west with her newborn son, hoping to find work and a quiet place where they could start again. Her husband had died before the baby was born, leaving Clara with nothing except a worn wagon, a few blankets, and the child she had promised to protect no matter what. That morning, she had believed she was finally getting closer to safety. By afternoon, the wind changed. Smoke appeared between the trees. Within minutes, sparks began falling from the sky. Clara tried to turn the wagon around, but one wheel struck a buried rock and snapped. The horse panicked and disappeared into the forest. She had no choice but to carry her baby and run. For nearly an hour, she stumbled through the wilderness while the flames followed. Her dress became torn against branches, her hands were scratched, and her ankle twisted badly when she stepped into a hidden hole. Still, she refused to stop. She found a massive tree and crouched behind it, hoping the flames would pass around them, but the fire was moving faster. Clara looked at her baby. His tiny face was red from the heat, and his cries were becoming weaker. "No, sweetheart," she whispered. "You stay with Mama." Then she heard something unexpected. Beneath the roar of the fire came the distant pounding of horse hooves. At first she thought it was only her frightened imagination. Then the sound grew louder. A rider appeared through the smoke, moving directly toward the flames. Clara stared in disbelief. The man wore a dark hat and a weathered leather coat, and his powerful brown horse pushed through the smoke as if the burning wilderness itself could not stop him. The rider saw Clara and immediately pulled the reins. His expression changed when he noticed the baby in her arms. He had wealth, land, cattle, and more money than most men in the territory could imagine, but none of it mattered in that moment. He had seen someone who needed help, and he was not going to leave her behind. The cowboy guided his horse closer, but a wall of flames suddenly erupted between them. Clara screamed and turned her body away from the heat, pressing the baby beneath her coat. The cowboy leaned forward, studying the fire for a path through. His name was Daniel Carter, a wealthy ranch owner known across several frontier towns for his cattle empire and his refusal to abandon people in danger. His men had warned him that the wildfire was spreading toward the valley, but Daniel had ridden ahead to check the old trail. He never expected to find a woman and a newborn trapped in the middle of it. "Can you walk?" he shouted. Clara shook her head. "My ankle." Daniel looked around quickly. The flames were closing from the west, while thick smoke covered the northern trail. There was only one narrow opening between two burning trees. It would not stay open for long. "Listen to me," he called. "When I reach you, give me the baby first." Clara tightened her arms around her son. "I can't lose him." "You won't?" Daniel answered firmly. "I'm bringing you both out." His voice carried something Clara had not heard in a long time: certainty. She watched as he turned his horse away from the flames, then suddenly kicked the animal forward. The horse charged through a narrow gap, sparks flying around its legs. Daniel lowered himself against the saddle as smoke swallowed him. For a terrifying moment, Clara could no longer see him. Then he emerged on the other side. He jumped from the saddle and ran toward her. "Give me the baby!" he shouted. Clara hesitated for only a second before placing the newborn into his arms. Daniel wrapped the child inside his own coat and held him tightly against his chest. Then he reached for Clara. She tried to stand, but her injured ankle collapsed beneath her. "I can't," she cried. "You have to." Daniel lifted her carefully, carrying her through the smoke while keeping the baby protected between them. Behind them, the tree Clara had been hiding beside burst into flames. Daniel looked toward his horse. "Hold on." He carried Clara to the saddle and helped her climb. Then he placed the baby safely against her chest before mounting behind them. The horse turned toward the only remaining trail. Flames were already crossing behind them. Daniel leaned forward and whispered to the animal, "Come on, boy. Just a little farther." The horse surged ahead. Burning branches fell around them. Smoke filled Clara's lungs, but she kept her arms wrapped around her baby. Daniel used one arm to shield her from the worst of the sparks while controlling the horse with the other. At last, they broke through the wall of smoke and reached a clearing beside a narrow stream. Daniel jumped down and helped Clara dismount. She fell to her knees, clutching the baby and sobbing. The newborn began crying loudly again. Clara pressed her lips against his forehead. "He's alive," she whispered. Daniel knelt beside her. "So are you." For the first time since the fire began, Clara allowed herself to believe that tomorrow might actually exist. Daniel took Clara and her baby to a small ranch house several miles from the wildfire. His workers had already moved the cattle toward safer ground, and the main house stood beyond the reach of the flames. Inside, Clara was given dry clothes, warm food, and a bed for the first time in days. A ranch hand cleaned her injured ankle while Daniel stayed nearby, making sure the baby had everything he needed. Clara could not understand why a man with so much wealth would risk his life for a stranger. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. Daniel looked at the sleeping child in her arms. "I didn't need to know your name to know you needed help." Those words stayed with Clara. For years, she had believed kindness always came with a price. After losing her husband and traveling alone with a newborn, she had learned to expect rejection, suspicion, and closed doors. Yet Daniel never asked what she could give him. He simply helped. Over the next several days, Clara recovered slowly. Her ankle improved and the baby grew stronger. Daniel offered her a position helping with the household and caring for the ranch garden. He made it clear she could leave whenever she wanted. But Clara had nowhere she truly wanted to return to. So she stayed. As weeks became months, something unexpected happened. The ranch that had once belonged only to Daniel began to feel like home. Clara's baby learned to smile when Daniel entered the room. Daniel, who had spent years living alone, found himself laughing again. Clara noticed that the wealthy rancher who seemed so confident around cattle and business became completely helpless whenever the baby grabbed his finger. One evening, months after the wildfire, Clara stood on the porch watching the sunset. Daniel joined her. The valley was peaceful now, covered in golden grass beneath a clear sky. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked. Clara looked toward the distant mountains. "Every day." She touched the small scar on her hand. "I thought I was going to lose everything." Daniel nodded. "But you didn't." Clara smiled softly. "No, I found something I never expected." Daniel looked at her. "What?" She looked toward the baby sleeping inside the house. Then she looked back at him. "A reason to believe that life wasn't finished with me." Daniel's eyes softened. He had rescued Clara because she was trapped by fire, but somewhere along the way, she had rescued something inside him too. His loneliness had disappeared. His ranch was no longer simply land and cattle. It had become a home filled with laughter, warmth, and people who mattered. Years later, Clara would tell her son about the day a stranger rode through a wildfire to save them. She would tell him that courage was not about having no fear. It was about choosing to move forward while terrified. And whenever she remembered Daniel appearing through that wall of flames, she remembered one simple truth. Sometimes hope arrives on horseback when you least expect it. If you enjoyed this emotional Wild West story, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable stories of courage, kindness, and second chances.